a lot of them that are still used to this day. I'm pretty sure Houndoom is still used. I like Donphan, I think, is a pretty good UU Pokemon. Gen 2 has a lot of the UU Pokemon, and I like underused Pokemon, so I like a lot of them. And there are tons of useful Pokemon in the Johto League. Sometimes stats doesn't mean everything. So, he said, this is his reply. Nah, even Gen 1 had a lot of Pokemon that were stronger than Gen 2 Pokemon. And I reply, yeah, that's because Gen 1 had a lot more Pokemon to be stronger with. And what are you talking about with the IVs? The range for IVs changed from 0 to 15 to 0 to 31 for all Pokemon. That and they weren't affected by crap like genders. Shinies don't have set IVs anymore. If anything, changes could only help the older Pokemon. Not really. So let me explain. The range changed from 0 to 15 to 0 to 31, yes. But that means that 31, it went from 15 being the max stat to 31 being the max stat. They just kind of split it up a whole lot more. Thus, the newer Pokemon had a much larger range to start with, so thus their stats are higher to begin with. Okay, a lot of the newer Pokemon were just made stronger, and the IVs kind of had something to do with that. It's not a very good point, I'll admit. But it's not a very good point, I'll admit, but it did kind of have an effect on the strength of the later Pokemon. And I didn't even care about genders or shinies or anything like that. You're just bringing that up. So, and he told me to explain more about the Stantler versus Ho-Oh's Lugia fight. Skill level would be important no matter what. Defeating a shitty player means nothing. Good point, I'll admit. And I say they were both good players. One used UUs and the other used Ubers. The one with the Stantler started off with Confused Ray, was able to get a Reflect Up, and pummeled the two birds. It's not always a matter of stats, but a matter of creativity with Pokemon, and you can do a lot with second-gen Pokemon on that front. And that I still hold by. You can do a whole lot, especially in the newer games with these Pokemon. Like, for example, what's it called? I'm getting a blank. Hold on a second. I'm gonna look. Oh, I remember now. Dunsparce. Dunsparce sucked in Gen 2. I'll kind of admit it. It doesn't really have a lot to do. But even in the newer games, well, even then, it had the... Hold on, let me restart. Dunsparce now has a lot to offer because of Serene Grace. It can kick ass. I won't explain how. Just having Serene Grace really helps Dunsparce, and it makes it going from a kind of crappy Pokemon from a really good Pokemon to, not really good, but a moderately useful Pokemon. And if we're going by new gen, using second gen Pokemon in new games, you can do a lot with them. Like Heracross is still used. Heracross is pretty awesome. Shuckle can still be used as the tank that he was. Wobbuffet is still an Uber, if I remember. You can still use these Pokemon rather creatively. Sure, their stats might not be as great, but you can use their move options to great effect. And so he says, I'm doubtful of them being both good players. A Stantler is simply not that good. If you mean creativity by creativity you mean most, all I can say is that there are Pokemon with great moveset that still suffered because of their stats. Now, the Stantler versus Ho-Oh and Lugia thing. This Stantler kicked ass. Okay? Sometimes having bad stats doesn't mean it's a bad Pokemon. This trainer was able to effectively use weaker Pokemon to beat a stronger Pokemon. And someone else, I don't remember who, commented that it using luck just makes it not count because it's luck, and that's the only reason why it won. And then I have to say, well, if it's unfair to use luck moves, then it should be unfair to use such overpowered Pokemon as Ubers. I'm going to go off on a little tangent, but I really hate that sort of attitude. Oh, it's okay to use the strongest Pokemon in the game, but you use Quick Claw? Oh, no. But anyway, back on topic. Yeah, just because the Pokemon stats aren't good doesn't mean it can't do stuff. Okay, they were both equally skilled. I know that. I know both of these people. And so, you can't doubt things that you don't... Well, you can, but just trust me on this. They were both good players. They've both won and lost to each other multiple times. And the Stantler beat a Ho-Oh and a Lugia twice in a row. It's just sometimes ingenuity is better than brute strength. But anyway, continue. Alakazam is one I'll just why because you mentioned it in your video. Zam got weaker as time got on. 4th gen's physical special split made it lose the elemental pot just because its attack stat is shit. Also, I'm cool with the last part. The elemental punching Alakazam was only one of many Alakazams. It lost the punches, but it also gained Shadow Ball and Focus Blast. Pretty even trade-off, I'd say. Alakazam is still overpowered. It's always been overpowered. It didn't become less overpowered in Gen 3, so I don't know why you even bring that it got weaker over time thing up. But anyway, then I'm just going to go on. I also have to note that you said the special physical split that made very few Pokemon better as a result. That's wrong, man. Breloom and Caesar wouldn't be where they were without the split. Wrong! Breloom is one of the only Pokemon in the game that can effectively pull off Focus Punch, which is pretty awesome. Breloom was awesome in Gen 3, and I don't even know what in Gen 4 made it better, what you're talking about. They're pretty much the same. Caesar's always been popular. You couldn't go anywhere in Gen 2 without seeing someone with a Caesar. Caesar's always been overpowered. It's always been a good Pokemon. Tyranitar likes to split too. Tyranitar's always been good. Sure, it might have given them a new move option, but it didn't make them good magically. They've always been good. Gengar fucking loves the split. Physical ghost attacks were a major screw you to Gengar and many other ghost types. There were 4 ghost types before Gen 4, okay? And so having physical ghost attacks being a major screw you to Gengar, well, screw Gengar. He's only one Pokemon. What about Baynet? Baynet was awesome. It had a great physical stat, and it could use Shadow Ball awesomely. So maybe switching Shadow Ball to Special was a major screw you to Baynet. Okay, Gengar didn't need Shadow Ball to be awesome. It had Thunderbolt. It had I don't think it had Flame Ball. It had Thunderbolt. It had Psychic. It had all sorts of moves that Gengar could use. Gengar didn't need the stat to be awesome. I was a supporter of Haunter before Gen 4 even came out. And so the split made attacks like Shadow Ball special, thus making them awesome. No. Okay? No. Shadow Ball was a great move for plenty of other Pokemon, and they don't even have that choice anymore. Flareon could use Shadow Ball effectively. I've done it before. Snorlax could use Shadow Ball effectively. Tons of physical attackers loved Shadow Ball, and now it's gone. They're not left with anything. Psychic types are harder to take down now because of the Shadow Ball being special. Because psychic types have generally have good special defense or decent special defense and horrible physical defense. Having physical ghost type moves makes sense because not only do you get double damage, you're hitting on their crappy physical defense. So, yeah. That's the end of everything that he said. Did he change my mind about Gen 2 being my favorite? No. Okay, you still have failed to prove that Gen 4 is the best out of all of them, which is one of the things you did. You tried to prove that Gen 2 was the worst. I'll admit it, you tried, but you didn't even bring up anything about Gen 4 being the best, and it isn't. Honestly, it isn't. From a presentation standpoint, it's pretty much the same thing as Gen 3. Point against it already. From a world standpoint, I don't like it, but that's just my own opinion, so I guess that can't be counted for something. From a Pokemon design standpoint, these Pokemon suck. I think that's been a generally accepted thing from the very beginning. But I only have to say the word Bidoof, and then everybody agrees with me. And from a statistical standpoint, these Pokemon are overpowered. And if there's one thing I hate overpowered Pokemon. I hate that. I hate how any loser with an Alakazam can win, and the guys with a Hypno are left in the dust. I hate that, but that's just my own opinion. You failed to prove that Gen 2 is the worst out of all of them, because if you think about it, Gen 2 is a Game Boy game. Gen 4 is a DS game. You can't compare the two. It's like trying to compare filet mignon with beef jerky. They're in 2 different leagues, and you can't accurately compare them. Okay, but if you compare how well Gen 2 was aged in comparison to Gen 4, Gen 2's aged a lot better than Gen 4 ever will. And why? Because Gen 2 was able to do a whole lot with Game Boy Color capacity. A whole lot. Gen 4 was able to do pretty much everything Gen 3 did, and change a few things up a little bit, and add barely noticeable 3D graphics that probably didn't take up that much space. Okay, 10 years from now, we're going to be looking back at Gen 4 as being entry in the franchise. People, it's been nearly 10 years since Gen 3, and people are already looking at it as the entry in the franchise. Gen 2, 10 years later, is still being loved. Why? Because it did a whole lot more in Game Boy cartridge than than Diamond did in with DS cartridge. But I've already said that enough times. So in conclusion, yeah, I don't think you've proven your point there, BrawlZeroEight. Valiant effort, I have to admit. And if you think I'm wrong, well, I'm going to continue to be a pretentious douchebag anyway. But yeah, this is ExandShadow. I welcome your comments on BrawlZeroEight or anybody else who disagrees with me. Bring it on. I'd be happy to have a battle of wits with you any day. And if I've said anything that upsets you, it's all a joke, man. No hard feelings. This has been ExandShadow. I'll see you guys later.